Today we're going to talk about Trump and Republicans rapidly abandoning their own base with an agenda that seems scientifically engineered to lose them support. And I've got two interviews. I sit down with Pod Save America's Tommy Vitor to discuss the immediate implications of Trump abandoning Ukraine and the broader implications of the U.S. realigning the global world order. And I interviewed Texas State Representative James Tallarico about the rise of Christian nationalism and how we reverse that tide. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're watching No Lie. So you've obviously all seen the Oval Office fight this past week where Trump and J.D. Vance handed a gift to Vladimir Putin in the form of a shouting match with Ukrainian President Zelensky, ultimately culminating into Zelensky getting thrown out of the White House, peace talks called off, and a virtual assurance to Russia that American aid to Ukraine is no longer on the table. And the implications here are obviously massive. Not only could this end Ukraine's hopes of winning the war, which would obviously mean more death and more destruction at the hands of Putin's murderous regime, but without the United States, that may mean the end of NATO. NATO is responsible for the longest period of peace in modern world history. If the post-World War II alliance falters, that means we could enter into a modern era of imperialism where Russia seeks to rebuild the USSR, where China seeks to take over Taiwan, even where the United States tries to annex territory in Panama or Greenland or Mexico or Canada. And look, I know that sounds insane, but we should disabuse ourselves of the notion that something sounding insane somehow means that it won't happen. An insurrection sounded insane. The U.S. siding with the world's autocrats and dictators sounded insane. And yet, here we are. But geopolitical and humanitarian implications aside, I want to talk about the politics of this for a moment. Because despite Trump's insistence on barreling ahead with this move, the reality is that it is aggressively unpopular. Let's consider a poll done by Republican firm 1892 Polling. This is a poll of Republican voters, a poll where among the respondents, 83% had a favorable opinion of Trump. So this isn't a room full of MSNBC viewers, right? These are Republicans, more than 8 in 10 of whom like Trump. In that poll, 69% said they agreed that Russia is the aggressor. 60% said they would support continued weapons assistance to Ukraine under certain circumstances, and 71% said that they're more likely to support aid for Ukraine when they were told that Russia has kidnapped more than 19,000 Ukrainian children. And those are the Republicans. Obviously, the Democrats are much more sympathetic to Ukraine and much more hostile to Russia, meaning that Trump has not only undermined the global world order to position the U.S. with autocrats and dictators like Putin and Xi and Kim Jong-un and Erdogan, but he's done so in stark opposition to even his own base, which raises the question here, does it matter? I mean, Trump's a lame duck, or at least he is until he tries to change the Constitution to run again, but right now he's a lame duck, and so who cares if he does unpopular stuff, right? Well, I should remind you that Trump demands total fealty from his party, meaning it's not just him who's doing the unpopular stuff. He's forcing his party to get on board with the unpopular stuff too. Meaning these people on the right, who, to be clear, know full well what all of this means, are left defending the indefensible in moments like this one. Here's Democratic Senator Mark Kelly questioning Trump's Deputy Secretary of Defense nominee, Stephen Feinberg.
Mr. Feinberg, did Russia invade Ukraine?
Well, going to my behind closed doors statement a second ago, I'll just say this.
They moved tanks and troops and armored personnel carriers across the Ukrainian border. It's a pretty simple question.
Yeah. Well, here's how, if I may, I'd like to
If
say,
you would ask the chairman of this committee if Russia invaded Ukraine, I'm pretty sure, the Republican chairman, I'm pretty sure I would know the answer.
Like, we are now at the point where no one in the GOP is allowed to even acknowledge objective reality regarding the fact that Russia invaded Ukraine. This isn't partisan. It is a clear as day fact that on February 24th, 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. I know because I interviewed President Biden the next day, February 25th, 2022, and I was actually beyond certain while I was packing that the interview was going to get canceled because this was the first time that a land war broke out in Europe in like 70-something years. And somehow it didn't get canceled, which thank God. But the fact is that Republicans can't even bring themselves to acknowledge objective reality. Reality no less real than saying 2 + 2 is 4. And that is a testament to the fact that they are going to be saddled with the same baggage as Trump is, only unlike him, they are running for re-election. meaning his insistence on total fealty from his conference means that everybody gets covered with the same stink from his unpopular policies. And I want to be clear, it's not just on the Russia-Ukraine stuff. Trump has empowered Elon, for example, to run roughshod over the government and to fire thousands of employees at the NIH and the EPA and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and USAID. He's empowered Elon to allow his band of teenagers unfettered access into our most sensitive private data. He's empowered Elon to shut down or cripple entire agencies. That is not popular. By a 2-to-1 ratio, Americans disapprove of Elon's actions. A CNN poll found that 54% of Americans said that giving Elon Musk a prominent role in the administration was a bad thing, while only 28% said that it was a good thing. And according to Pew, only 11% of Americans have a very favorable view of Musk. But regardless, the Republicans are forced to defend all of this stuff, to defend Elon Musk, to defend Doge, because if Trump and Elon are going down, the entire party is going down with them. So even though, again, Trump is a lame duck and no one else in the conference is a lame duck, that doesn't matter as far as Trump is concerned. An anchor around his neck is an anchor around all of their necks. Even this budget resolution that just passed, it'll mean that Medicaid gets cut, it'll mean that food stamps gets cut, it'll mean that the deficit explodes and adds trillions to the debt, also that millionaires and billionaires can get a tax cut on the backs of working class Americans. 71% of Trump voters oppose cuts to Medicaid. Protecting earned benefits and especially protecting healthcare is one of the most popular political positions you could have. Trump is against it, which means that Republicans, of course, had to throw their weight against it too. And every single one of them in the House, except for Thomas Massie, put their name on this thing when they voted for the budget resolution. And now they have to go back to their districts and their town halls and get utterly decimated by their own constituents, even in heavily, heavily Republican areas. But you know the rule. Trump the lame duck issues his clarion call, and his very much not lame duck colleagues have to throw their weight behind this stuff because they've contracted their power out to him, and that's how it goes. So look, we obviously have a long road ahead here, but Republicans are doing Democrats' work for them right now. They are lining up behind the least popular policies you could possibly imagine, and far from Trump trying to set his own party up for success moving forward, he's instead dragging them down into the depths of the ocean by forcing them on board with policies that Americans despise. They clearly feel unaccountable to anybody right now, but Americans are paying attention. And it's not just Democrats, by the way. Republican voters, too, are recognizing the dangers of the extremism of this Republican Party. Our job is to make sure that those voters are reminded of it as much as humanly possible. Next up are previews of my interviews with Tommy Vitor and James Tallarico. But first, just a quick reminder, this is my once-weekly video podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. It's identical to my once-weekly audio podcast. On this one show, one video per week, I have sponsors. So here's a quick word from some sponsors, and then my interviews with Tommy Vitor and James Tallarico. No Lie is brought to you by Aura Frames. So gifts are tough for me. I'm not a great gift giver, but I've very quickly come to realize that gifts that mean something are way preferable to, clothes or something like that. And it doesn't get more meaningful than a digital picture frame from Aura. It's perfect for sharing pictures of all the things that your family, who might be far away, might even live on the other side of the country like mine, can't be there for, from family vacations to their grandkids' graduation. I get stuck in old photo rabbit holes all the time, and honestly, I love it. I was always the guy who brought the camera out in the early 2000s. I had my Nikon Coolpix because smartphones didn't exist yet. There's nothing better than going through those old photos and seeing what my friends and family were getting into 10, 20 years ago. Now you can relive those moments all the time with Aura Frames. Aura Frames are the perfect gift. They've been featured in 495 gift guides during 2024 alone. They were selected 3 times as one of Oprah's favorite things, and they were named the #1 digital picture frame by Wirecutter, The Strategist, and Wired. Right now you can save on the perfect gift that keeps on giving by visiting auraframes.com. For a limited time, listeners can get $20 off their best-selling Carver Matte frame with code BTC. That's AURA frames.com, promo code BTC. Don't forget to mention that we sent you to show your support for the show. Terms and conditions apply. No Lie is brought to you by Armor Colostrum. Before I worked in politics, I was actually a certified personal trainer, and a big part of my life still, to this day, is taking care of my health. Although, admittedly, my mental health could be better, but occupational hazard. But I've been hearing a lot about Armor Colostrum for a while, and I didn't know what it was, so I asked around and realized that it's really well known and its health benefits are too. So here's the deal. Armor Colostrum strengthens immunity, optimizing your whole body microbiome and strengthens your immune barrier along the mouth, sinuses, lungs, gut, urinary, and reproductive tract to guard against unwelcome particles for your strongest immune health. And that's just scratching the surface. It also fortifies gut health, ignites metabolism, vitalizes hair growth, enhances skin radiance, and fuels performance and recovery. We've worked out a special offer for my audience. Receive 15% off your first order. Go to tryarmra.com/BTC or enter BTC to get 15% off your first order. That's TRYARMRA.com/BTC. For the immediate future right now, as far as Ukraine is concerned and its effort to cast aside this Russian onslaught, what does this mean for Ukraine?
Yeah, I mean, Vladimir Putin's having a good day. Ben Rhodes and I just recorded an episode for YouTube, for the Pod Save the World YouTube, and we were debating whether this was the worst meeting we've ever seen or heard of in, like, American history. I mean, there have probably been some awful conversations that happened in the Oval Office behind closed doors, but I can never remember the President of the United States and a foreign leader going at it like this in front of the cameras. It was just a disaster for Zelensky and a disaster for the people of Ukraine. So the U.S. and Ukraine were supposed to sign some sort of agreement today about working together to get rare earth minerals out of Ukraine. That's obviously off the table. But the bigger picture goal for Zelensky in this visit was to get some sort of reassurance from the United States that we have their back still. And it's hard to watch Trump's behavior in that meeting, his mocking of Zelensky when he talked about not wanting a ceasefire with Putin because Putin was going to break it, the screaming from J.D. Vance. I mean, Zelensky must walk out of the Oval today feeling like he's just lost his most important ally, and I'm not sure he knows how to get them back.
Was there any world in which this didn't end this way? And I ask that because it feels like this is what they had intended on doing regardless.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like this just devolves into this just because that's how events unfold. I mean, this was clearly, at least in my opinion, premeditated. Things can't devolve that quickly unless you had intended on them devolving that quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I had the same impression you did, Brian. I think that Trump and J.D. Vance wanted to put on a show for the cameras and for a domestic political audience. J.D. Vance kind of gave up the game. I don't know if you noticed when he started complaining about Zelensky going to Pennsylvania in October, and he accused him of making a partisan campaign stop for the opposition. So it's pretty clear that was what J.D. Vance was mad about. I will say, I do think Zelensky is in an impossible situation. This man has been through hell. He is exhausted. He is fried. He is trying to save his country. But I do think he made a strategic error getting in that back and forth with J.D. Vance, challenging Vance, and spinning up Trump like that. Like, we know how Donald Trump is. He's a bully. He demands that you bow down before him and kiss the ring. And Zelensky just wasn't in the mood to do it.
Tommy, are we in a world where even your usual Republican, insofar as we even have moderate Republicans anymore, but where now already we've seen these Republicans that tweeted earlier today, including Roger Wicker, delete tweets that cast Zelensky in a good light? Are we in a world where not just the elected officials are going to completely abandon any adherence to, like, democracy, but also the Republican base? I'm curious what you think about both of those factions, both elected officials, even those who maybe, as late as this morning might have been pro-democracy, pro-Ukraine, are now going to just kowtow to Trump because he sent the clarion call out, and what you think about the base more broadly.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's been a slow but steady evolution towards just completely politicizing this whole issue. I mean, in the early days of this war, it was crystal clear to everyone that Russia was the aggressor, that they invaded a sovereign nation, that they tried to take out Zelensky a whole number of times. They tried to roll tanks into Kyiv. Like, this was black and white. There was an aggressor and someone who was invaded. Like, it was crystal clear. Over time, this issue has become partisan, and I'm not sure exactly why. I mean, there's sort of the weirdness of the Trump call to Zelensky leading to an impeachment inquiry. Clearly, that's something Trump is still pissed off about. Then there's the fact that, the war in Ukraine happened or the full-scale invasion happened on Joe Biden's watch. And Joe Biden made it really a feature of his messaging And he believes it to be one of his biggest accomplishments. And of course, Donald Trump is going to attack that. But you're right. I mean, now this is just completely politicized. People like Marco Rubio, who are big supporters of Ukraine, are now sitting on that couch, shrinking into his seat, looking like his soul has left his body as he watches J.D. Vance shout down this democratically elected leader who just a couple days ago Donald Trump called a dictator.
House Republicans just advanced a budget blueprint that would seek to cut Medicaid and food stamps. And of course, these are programs that benefit the disabled and the sick and the elderly and children. And so in light of the fact that, again, you're one of the few people who really is able to discuss this from the perspective of Christianity, can you speak on the hypocrisy of today's GOP, where they will use Christianity as a shield, more broadly speaking, but then on the specific issues where they can really kind of put their money where their mouth is and back up their words with actions, they're perfectly content to do things that really stand in stark contrast to the very religion that they hide behind?
Yeah, there are so many self-proclaimed Christians serving in Congress. They're supposed to be feeding the hungry, but they're cutting food stamps. They're supposed to be healing the sick, but they're eliminating Medicaid. They're supposed to be serving the poor, but they're cutting taxes for billionaires. It's because they're not following Jesus, they're worshiping Donald Trump. So this is not just a political problem. This is a theological problem. This is a problem in the church that I'm a part of, the church that I love. And so that's why I try to spend as much time in churches as I spend in town halls or in settings like this, because we have to go to the root of the problem. And that is the heresy of Christian nationalism that is taking over my religion.
And so how do you extricate Christian nationalism from Christian? And I know this is like not a problem we're going to figure out in this podcast here. It's obviously a much broader problem, but what do you see as the solution, even if it's a long-term solution? Because I guess the encroachment of Christian nationalism has been there for a long time. It's obviously really pervasive, and it doesn't seem like it's retreating anytime soon.
Yeah, this is something I think a lot about and spend a lot of my time working on. First, I think we should take a look in the mirror. And by we, I mean you and I and the people on this show, your listeners. We have ceded religion, we've ceded faith, we've ceded spirituality to the right wing. That started in the late 70s after Jimmy Carter was defeated into Ronald Reagan's presidency. And there was this marriage, this unholy alliance of the far right and Christian nationalists. We didn't necessarily have that term back then, but that's exactly what they were. We called it the religious right. But it is essentially people in power using religion to accumulate wealth and power for themselves. It's really nothing new. We've seen it throughout history. But in its current form, it really started in the late 70s. And that's partially on us as progressives because we allowed that to happen. We ceded the field to our opponents, and it's had disastrous consequences. I bet there are a lot of listeners to your show that love Jesus, that believe in the teachings of Jesus, and yet they have walked away from the church. They've walked away from religion. And they have allowed the other side to have a monopoly on faith. And so we've got to stop doing that. We have to start reclaiming this. So if you have viewers and listeners who consider themselves faithful, whether they're Christian or whether they belong to another tradition, and maybe they haven't been as active, I would encourage them to start showing up at your local church, start to reclaim these institutions and start redirecting them toward their original goal, which was loving our neighbors. And that's something that we can all support. And so that would be my first step, is for us to start fighting back, because nothing is going to change until we do that.
To watch the full interviews with Tommy Vitor and James Tallarico, click the thumbnails right here on the screen or check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel. You can also click the link on the screen to listen to the audio version of this episode, and of course to see more of my content, the subscribe button's on the screen as well.